Hi, this is a explanation of problem 7-18, which has to do with relevant cost analysis in a variety of situations, and it covers pretty much all of the major learning objectives from Chapter 7, so I thought you'd appreciate an overview. It really deals with a lot of the different kinds of decisions that might be made with respect to the cost. So we're going to try to figure out which costs are relevant and what to do with those. So this is a situation. I'm going to expand my screen just a little bit. Okay, so there's a company called Andretti, and they manufacture one product called a DAC. I don't know what that is, but it doesn't matter to us. The company normally produces 60,000 DACs each year. That information is going to come in handy in just a minute at $32 a unit. So they gave us this information here. Now, they didn't bold it like I did, but I wanted to point out that this bolding just indicated and helped me determine what the true variable costs were, except I bolded the wrong one. And that is going to help me figure out what. Yep, that's going to help me figure out what my contribution margin is. So over on the side here, what I'm going to do is add my $10 plus my $4.50 plus my $2.30 plus my $1.20, and that's going to give me $18. What does that mean? Well, that's our variable costs. So if we were told that our selling costs were $32, right? So $32 was that per unit. So if I take the $32 and I subtract it from the $18, which are my variable costs, what does that give me? Anybody remember? That's right, it's called the contribution margin. So that is my contribution margin. I'm going to use that in just a minute, okay? But I thought I'd let you know that that was one of the first things that I did. Okay, the first question says, assume that they have enough capacity without increasing their fixed manufacturing, meaning they didn't have to move to a larger facility to manufacture anything additional that might be coming down the pike. It said they could increase their sales by 25% above the present level of the 60,000 units each year if they were willing to increase our fixed selling expenses by $80,000. So what we're going to do is try to figure out if that's a good idea. A possible scenario in this situation would be the sales and marketing people come to us and say, hey, if we run an ad campaign, if we spend more money on our advertising to try to lure in more customers, we think that there will be an increase in sales. So we're going to see if this actually makes sense. So what is our increase in our sales per unit? Well, we have 60,000 that we're manufacturing each year. What is that times 25%? And that's 15,000. Now that's not a dollar amount, that's actually units. Okay, so that's an additional increase in sales, right? That's the number of units. Now remember up here, here's where my contribution margin comes in handy. I have a contribution margin of $14. All that means is that for every unit I produce, I incur $14 in charges. So if I produce 15,000 additional units at that $14, what's my incremental contribution margin? So I'm going to just take that and I'm going to multiply that out. And that is my incremental contribution margin. Now, remember they said I had to increase my fixed selling expenses by $80,000, so I'm going to do that here, but I think I'm still going to wind up ahead because I'm going to increase my contribution margin by $210,000 by only spending $80,000. The net of that whole thing is that my net operating income is going to go up by $130,000. Pretty cool, huh? Now, this next one is a little bit tricky. It says the company has 1,000 DACs on hand, and some of them are irregular, and so they can't really be sold as is. They're just, you know how you've been to like the sale part of a store, and sometimes there's some, out-of-box ones or some that have just a little something wrong with them. That's this case right here. It says it will be impossible to sell these at normal price through the regular distribution channels. So what unit cost figure is relevant for setting a minimum price figure? And what they're trying to get us to do here, which I don't know if it's completely successful, but anyway, we're going to consider that pretty much all of the costs are sunk, meaning manufacturing costs can't be recuperated, can't even be considered in this case, so perhaps the only cost that even might be able to be considered would be the $1.20 in the variable selling and administrative. And again, this may not even be the case if they have to give them to a liquidator or sell them at a pawn shop or whatever, but that's what they were looking for in this case, so I thought I'd explain that to you. All right, let's keep moving. Due to a strike in the supplier's plant, the company is unable to purchase more material to produce their precious little DAX. The strike is expected to last for 2 months, so they have enough material on hand to operate at 30% of their normal level for a couple of months. Okay, they could also close the plant down entirely. So in other words, does it make sense to hobble along at their 30% of their normal level, or should we just shut down for the month, right? So if the plant were closed, fixed manufacturing overheads would still complete at 60%, continue at 60%, meaning they're going to save 40% of their fixed manufacturing overhead if they were to shut down. Got that? And the fixed selling expenses would also be reduced by 20%. They'd still have to maintain 80% of those costs, but perhaps 20% of them could be reduced. Okay, so what's the impact on the profits? Well, let's take a look. Now here, what I'm looking for is what the impact is, what I'm going to lose. So look at it this way. I have 60,000, how come I can't see that? I have, let's try that again. Oops. I have 60,000 units. It's not working out too well. Okay, so I have 60,000 units. I'll get it right one of these times. Okay, and that's how many I normally sell. So they said that they could still produce 30% of those, but that's a per year figure, that 60,000. So what would it be for the 2 months? So basically I'm going to take the 60,000 and I'm going to divide that, or excuse me, I'm going to multiply that times the 0.30% that I'm still going to be able to operate as, but it's only for 2 months. So I'm going to multiply that 2 times 12. Okay, so you can see that. I don't know why it's not appearing here, but I can't fight Excel. So anyway, this is what it looks like. So I've got 60,000 units per year that I manufacture. If I keep hobbling along, then I could still produce 30% of them for 2 months. So that's what this figure is up here, 30% of the 60,000 times 2 months out of the year, and that is the 3,000 units that I could still produce. Now, this scenario says, what if I just stop altogether and I shut down? So what is the contribution margin that I'm going to lose? Well, I'm going to lose that 3,000 units that I can produce times my contribution margin, and if anybody remembers, that was $14 a unit. Where did I get that $14? That was earlier in the problem right up here. Okay, so that's how much contribution margin I'm actually going to give up. Now it asks us to put that in parentheses if we're going to lose that, so I'll do that in a minute. Okay, so we know that's what we're going to give up. In other words, we're not going to produce that. If we shut down, we're going to lose that contribution margin. But we are going to save some of our fixed manufacturing overhead. How much are we going to save? Do you happen to remember that back up over here, my total fixed manufacturing is $300,000. So what I'm going to do is say, all right, how much of that am I going to save? So I'm going to take my 300,000 and I'm going to save 40%. Why 40? Oops. Stop it. Times 0.40%. Why? Because it says that fixed manufacturing would continue at 60%. So if I continued on, I would save that. If not, I'll lose the. I'll at least be saving that 40%. Okay, but that's on a yearly basis. So now I have to multiply that times the 2 months of the year that I'm going to do that. And so the fixed manufacturing overhead, actually I'm going to take that and put that over here, is $20,000. Okay, so I'll I'll lose the contribution margin, but I'll gain, in other words, I'll save for my fixed manufacturing overhead. Same thing is true for my fixed selling and administrative. How much was my fixed selling and administrative? It was 210. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing here, 210. But in this case, it says they would be reduced by 20%. So they would be reduced by 20% times 0.20 for the 2 months out of the year, giving me $7,000. Okay, so what is the net disadvantage or advantage of closing? So this is the contribution margin that I'll be losing, but I'll be saving on some fixed manufacturing overhead and some fixed selling and administrative. So then if I just add this on up, plus this, then I'm actually going to be $15,000 behind, meaning that I shouldn't just close down shop. I should continue hobbling along at that 30%. And my fifth and I believe final question of this is an outside manufacturer has offered to produce them and ship them directly to the customer. So this is this make or buy decision, and we're going to see if this makes sense for Andretti. So if they accept the offer, the facility that it uses would be idle, but the fixed manufacturing overhead would be reduced by 75%, pretty good chunk, and the outside manufacturer would pay for all the shipping charges. So the only thing that Andretti would be responsible for would be the variable selling and administrative, but it would only be 2/3 of the present value. So let's see what we're going to save. Well, we're going to save because, again, somebody else is going to produce it for us, so we're going to save on the variable manufacturing overhead. How much was that? Well, let's look back up on the problem. So that would be the $10. We don't have to pay for direct materials or direct labor or variable manufacturing overhead. So that's 10 plus 450. I'm going to do that. $10 plus 450 plus $2.30. That's $16.80 that I'll be saving. I'm going to go ahead and put in that $16.80 that I'll be saving because I don't have to manufacture it myself. I'll also be saving fixed manufacturing overhead at the tune of $300,000, because remember that's what our fixed manufacturing overhead is, and I'll be saving 75% of that, which equals $225, and then you divide that by how many units a year, and that's your calculation. Okay, so that's how much I'll be saving. So I'll go ahead and do that in a formula right over here. So I'm going to take my 300,000 and I'm going to multiply that times 70%, and then I'm going to divide that by my 60,000. And that gives me $3.75 per unit of fixed manufacturing overhead. And variable selling and administrative is similar in a way, except that we're looking at the variable portion. If we come back up here, the variable portion was $1.20, and what are we going to save? Well, it says the variable selling and administrative would be 2/3, meaning I'm going to save 1/3. So I'm going to take that variable selling and administrative and I'm going to multiply that times 1 divided by 3. Multiply that 1 divided by 3, and I'll come up with 40 cents. So the total cost that I'll avoid will simply be all of these costs right here. Okay, an outside manufacturer is going to build it for us. So that's how that works. And I hope that that was helpful.